Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Aristides Lounge on Champions Day. I am John Boel with Wave 3 News. Moved here 30 years ago and bought a handicapping book at the old Holly Cook booksellers, you may remember, and I've never looked back. I devour this stuff, been lucky enough to win a couple of Eclipse Awards for media coverage, and I've got a fantastic panel here. We're going to talk a little handicapping for the Kentucky Derby. Let me introduce the panel members right now. Steve Bick, way down to my far left over here, host of At the Races with Steve Bick, Thoroughbred Racing's longest running, best known daily radio news magazine. Next to him, Donna Brothers, one of the most decorated female jockeys of her time, retired back in 1998 with 1,130 career wins, still ranks second on the money list, currently serves as horseback riding reporter and analyst for NBC Sports Triple Crown coverage. Tell you what, if you're watching, even if it's a boring race by Triple Crown standards, Donna's interview is going to be outstanding as she's coming alongside. Gary Young, right here, two over from me, clocker and bloodstock agent throughout his illustrious career. Horses recommended by Gary have accounted for 3 Breeders' Cups and 17 Grade 1 races, reaffirming Gary's opinion as one of the most respected in the game. And to my immediate left right here, Ed DeRosa, Director of Marketing for Brisnet.com, the official data source of the Kentucky Derby, and twinspires.com. All right, we're going to start off here. Back in the early 90s, I used to, at the station, dub some of the key Derby prep races onto a VHS tape and come home, and me and my friends would handicap and watch these races on a VHS player and try to glean things. Now it's so easy, you just punch it up on the computer, watch all the races here in an hour if you want. I want to go down the line here, and I want to ask our panelists, for one moment from one race, what was it that maybe changed your opinion or had a big impact on you, and why? Okay, let's start with Ed.
From the Derby Trail or in my life?
From the Derby Trail,
oh, okay.
this year, I'm sorry.
Well, that gets to narrow it down.
Yeah, that narrowed down a little bit.
All right, it would definitely be by my standards for me. I didn't love him in the Louisiana Derby. It was 20-1, so I wasn't alone in not loving him. But if you were here for the draw or saw the stream, they had a replay of it. And Gabriel Saez had a decision to make, and by my standards went with him, and they made a move between horses that ended up being the winning move, and he kept going, running away from spinoff for trainer Todd Pletcher, and that was a race War of Will was in as well. So seeing by my standards make that move in a Derby prep, going 1 1/8, gave me some confidence that he can get it done in 1 1/4 as well. And as a Brisnet user, he got a good speed rating as well. So the numbers match up. He passed the eye test, and he moved way up on my Derby list that day.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. The hole was over to his left, ducked through there like Barry Sanders, and was gone. Okay, Gary, your moment.
When Omaha Beach broke his maiden, I watched this horse work for his first race, and I just thought he was a terrific horse. And after he lost his first 3 races, the following morning after he had lost his 3rd race, I was walking through the parking lot next to Clocker's Corner at Santa Anita, and Richard Mandela was walking through there. And he's a friend of mine, and I obviously greatly respect him. And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" He goes, "Sure." I go, "How is this horse still a maiden?" And he started laughing. He goes, "I don't know, you know." And he put him on the dirt for his next race after losing his first 3 races on the turf. And when he broke his maiden that day, it was on a wet racetrack. And he just, I mean, the field that he blew away was not, it wasn't that great a field, but he just did it like when he came down the stretch, I'm like, that's the horse I've been expecting to see in his first 3 races. And obviously that was a springboard to what has now got him into the role as the favorite for the Kentucky Derby.
Okay, Donna, how about you? A moment from a race and what impact it had on you?
I'm going to go with Omaha Beach also, but not the same race. When he won the Rebel Stakes, the horse that he beat was Game Winner, who had a license to get tired. Baffert had said he hadn't been able to get the training in him that he'd wanted to. And then when he came back and won the Arkansas Derby, I felt like that really solidified him as a really solid horse on the Derby Trail. He also beat another Baffert horse that day, the highly touted Improbable, who had had a little bit of a bad trip in the race before in the other division of the Rebel Stakes. And so I feel like that race in the Arkansas Derby solidified him as maybe not if the horse to beat. At that point, I didn't think that's the favorite for the Kentucky Derby, but I definitely felt like it sealed the deal that he was a good horse.
Okay, Steve.
for me, it's improbable, and had actually 2 occasions. The first came right here. And of course, early on the Juvenile Day card for Breeders' Cup, when he broke his, did he break it? No, he didn't break his maiden. He had his first stake win in the street sense. And it was so impressive, and the way he moved away and just won by open lengths. And then it so happened I was at Los Al for the Futurity. And I've got a real affection for Los Al, and when it comes to juveniles, translating here, that long, long stretch, Los Al is like a elongated paper clip. And the way he came down the stretch at Los Al, he was my Derby horse from that point. And I just thought that, this is a horse that, especially in Baffert's hands, is going to have every chance to be successful in the classics. And so those back-to-back within a month of each other basically pretty much grabbed me.
Okay, excellent. Before we go any further, we need to address the elephant in the room, literally to our left here. I need to ask all of you, does anything in today's post positions draw compromise any of the horses in your mind or enhance their chances? Let's start with Ed.
Well, certainly the rail is not the best place to be, and I'll yield most of that discussion to Gary Young, who I know liked War of Will a lot more than I did, but especially Omaha Beach in post 12 is probably the biggest upgrade, and he's the favorite, so he really didn't need it, but no complaints, I'm sure.
All right, next.
I felt like someone just gave me a shot to the guts when War of Will drew the 1 hole. I thought if, a hypothetical situation, the 2 most likely winners in the race, I believed were Omaha Beach and Game Winner, but they were going to be the first and second choices, and they still will be. War of Will was going to be 15-1 or so, and over my years of gambling, I've always tended to go with the big prices over the little prices, but the 1 hole is like a kiss of death. I texted Mark Casse after the pill was drawn. I said, "Now what?" with a question mark, and he just texted me back, "We're going to the lead," which it does seem like there's a little bit less pace in this year's Derby as opposed to some of the previous Derbies of recent years, but the 1 hole is just, he's got to break sharp, and he's got to relax. The one thing that you're a little bit nervous watching him train is he's a high energy horse, so he's really up against it. He really is. He's got to break, make the lead, and then try to relax. That's.
And Gary, I think you should explain to them why the 1 hole is so bad in the Derby where it meets the fence so quickly.
With 20 horses in there, the 1 hole, Donna has done it on the telecast where you're actually coming out of the gate, and instead of, you're actually being pointed right at the fence. So you have to, in order to show speed like Mark Casse wants this horse, he's going to have to outbreak the horses in the 2 and 3 hole and come over, because when he comes out of the gate in the 1 hole in the Kentucky Derby, you're actually being pointed right towards the fence.
And one thing I've noted, I looked at what the rail has done, and there has been some success. We saw Looking at Lee second from the rail, and some others have performed okay. One thing that's interesting to note, though, is that the first call from the rail, the horses are either in the top 5 or the bottom 5. So for Mark Casse to say they want to go to the lead, if they get caught in traffic and end up mid-pack, it's over.
Donna, I can remember watching the aerial view of Ferdinand in '86 just being repeatedly banged against the rail and then circling the field. And I thought, well, that's not so bad, but I was just checking today. 1% of the horses in the 1, 2, or 3 holes since '87 have won the Kentucky Derby, it's not just the 1 hole, is it? It's out there a little ways too, right? Or not?
I think the 1 hole is just the kiss of death. And obviously we saw from the post position draw when Travis Stone was going through them, there's actually never been a winner from the 17 hole either, which is just an anomaly. It's really one of those stats that doesn't really make any sense, and Roadster's got the 17 hole. But I think the 1 hole, you just have so much pressure on you, especially as a rider, and having been a jockey myself, I can't imagine what it's like to be sitting there in the 1 post position, not looking down the track, but instead staring at the inside rail right in front of you, knowing that you've got to keep your horse standing there relaxed, calm, and then as soon as that gate opens, act like a bat out of, what do they call it, bat out of hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, like get out of there as fast as you possibly can. And so it's a really, it's just a difficult situation to be in for the horse and for the rider. And especially the reason why looking at Lee could run well from that post position is because he doesn't have speed. Yeah. So if any of these other horses that don't have speed would have drawn, you know, like a long range Toddy would have been fine in the one post, but not War of Will.
And Steve, your thought, did anybody's chances compromised or enhanced by this draw?
Well, there's a few things that happened in here. One of the most remarkable is with about 6 horses that were interested in the front end, 5 of them drew between the 1 and the 7. So instead of having speed kind of spread out across the gate, you now have got War of Will in the 1, Gray Magician in the 4, Improbable in the 5, Vacoma in the 6, Maximum Security in the 7. So you've got 5 horses within 7 gates that are all part of the pace picture here. So first of all, there's a chance for them all to prompt each other, and we may end up, you know, with a little bit more of that prompted early pace that didn't look like was going to be evident on paper coming into this over the last couple of weeks. A few other things happened in this. This is a huge benefit for Tacitus. Sitting in the 8-hole, the 4 horses to his inside are going to clear. It's basically a gauntlet that he can set up shop just absolutely beautifully and be as forward and basically probably right in the 2.5, 3 path and set himself up in a great position to stalk behind the leaders or drop back as far as he cares to. It's a real benefit for Jose Ortiz. And for Omaha Beach, this was a dream scenario. You've got these speeds that are going to be all headlong, and no less than Mike Smith is going to be able to pick his spot drafting off those speeds. So there were some real clear winners in this. And the most interesting issue is going to be what Arad Ortiz chooses to do with speeds to either side of him. And Gary, you know, you've been talking and noting that Improbable has been pretty keen early in these works. Then he has settled around the turn. How aggressive is he going to be with speeds to either side?
You know, I think Bob's going to just, I think Bob's main concern is just going to be to get him to relax, because his best chance, his only chance to win and his only chance to get 1.25 miles in my book is if this horse comes off the bridle. If he's pulling at any time in this race, I think he's very iffy at 10 furlongs in the first place, but if he pulls at any time early in this race, I think his chances are very, very much minimized.
Hey, John, one thing I'd like to add to the post position draws is that I think the most favorable draw for anybody was Omaha Beach, not just because of the speed you're talking about, but to the inside of him is the 11 Heichel, and to the outside of him is the 13 Code of Honor. So he doesn't have speed on either side.
Right, got a little bumper.
He can break those 2
cushion.
horses, drop back, and he should fall out into a perfect position.
And I'll give you another horse that is now with the draw of the 14-hole for win-win-win and the return to Julian Pimentel. There's going to be this assumption that win-win-win is going to be in the back half of the field or even in the back quadrant. His best races have been when he has been drafting along with the pace. Pimentel is going to follow Omaha Beach and shadow Omaha Beach. That's going to put him into a nice race flow, and win-win-win has finished in all of his races. I think this elevates his chance to be involved, at least in the exotics. I don't know if he can win. I'm certainly rooting for Charlotte Weber more than anybody in this to win a race. She's sort of the Paul Mellon of this group of owners, and she deserves to win a Kentucky Derby with what she's given to this game over 4 decades. So I'd like to see win-win-win get the trip. And for Julian Pimentel to get a chance in the Derby, he never should have been taken off this horse. I think he's the horse I think you want sitting in your 3rd deck, 3rd, 4th, super high 5. I think he's got a big chance to juice up exotics.
One of the things I've seen over the decades here, especially doing TV coverage of the Derby, is from the beginner to the advanced handicapper, complete varied opinions on how much credence to give the Derby workouts. So there's a good question to start with, Gary, but I want to hear from all of you on this. Help us navigate how much credence to put into the Derby workouts and what you're looking for. Like in my untrained eye, the best thing I saw was Omaha Beach get a new shoe and put up a 59 for 5 furlongs. To me, that told me something. But let's start with you. You tell me. You tell us.
Well, we're dealing with the Kentucky Derby horses. Obviously, we're dealing with high-quality horses. Most high-quality horses work well. You want to see a horse when they work for the Kentucky Derby. You want to see him accomplish. You know, you'd like to see a good time, but that's just a small piece of the puzzle. You just want to see a horse that is doing it totally within himself. You want to see when the rider stands up after the wire that the horse gallops out on his own without any encouragement, like, that was fun, let me keep doing some more. You know, the horse's last works for the race can be very telling. I will tell you, when I came here in 2011, I did not have Animal Kingdom at all on my radar screen. He worked lights out. I went with him, and he won the race. So I think they can be very valuable. The better quality the horse, the more meaningful the workouts are. Do most of these horses, do they work well? Yeah, and the track this week has been very lively. The workout times for this race, when Shug McGahee has a horse blow out in 46 and 4, you know that the track is very fast.
Too.
Asmussen too. Asmussen in 47 and 4. Usually he's somewhere between 50 and 51 for his last work. So, you know, you just want to see a positive workout. You want to see the horse come out of the workout and gallop, you know, after that into the race, like Omaha Beach went this morning, where he had his neck bowed. It's like he knows what's coming, and he's reveling in being here.
All right, Ed, you next on this.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely about upgrades and downgrades, and part of the reason TwinSpires brings Gary in to provide that information. We're not necessarily looking for the winner. Obviously, Animal Kingdom was a nice one to land on top based on what we saw, but for the way I play the Derby, which is to find a live long shot and hope they get in the number with the logicals and still make a nice score, you want to know who's doing well, and by my standards, who I mentioned earlier out of the Louisiana Derby is a horse who's turned some heads before today, and a horse I might ride with because he had been working so well. But on the opposite end, you definitely don't want to hear they're not doing well or missing training or things out of the norm. But as we talked about, Gary, there really hasn't been any side of the extreme this year.
No, there hasn't. I mean, we still have obviously a few days to go, and anything can happen. You know, a horse can get sick and a bellyache and have to miss out. But as of right now, knock on wood, we haven't had any defections, and let's just hope it stays that way.
What about you, Donna? Can you think of maybe an anecdotal story where you saw something and learned from it, and you were right based on a work?
Well, we'll find out if I'm right about the one I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
I don't like anything I'm seeing from improbable in his works. This is a horse who, if you watch him work in the morning, you're going to love everything you see about it. You're going to love the way he moves over the track. You're going to love his stride. You're going to love his eagerness. You're going to love his gallop out, all of those things. And you would bet everything in your pocket if the race was a mile or a mile and a 16th. But I don't like what I'm seeing from him in his works to go a mile and a quarter. He's by City Zip, who was a known sprinter. He doesn't necessarily have the pedigree. Is this him right now?
Yep.
So you can see they put a workmate in front of him, and the intention here was to get him to relax off that workmate. This is his work here at Churchill Downs a couple of days ago, and he's the furthest thing from relaxed. He's just dragging his rider around there, and as Gary had mentioned earlier, if he does this in the afternoon for the Derby, he can't win the Derby, and I haven't seen him not do this in a work yet unless he's been by himself, and he worked many, many times late in his 2-year-old year by himself, which is unusual to take a 2-year-old and work them 6 furlongs by themselves. So I'm not seeing anything from him in his morning works that makes me indicate that he's going to relax in the Derby or that he's going to be able to get the mile and a quarter.
Okay, and Steve, finally on this question, your thoughts.
You know, I love coming here. I'm here 2 weeks every year, and you know, the opportunity to see potentially horses change and get momentum through the week. There's little things, there's some little goofy things that I kind of watch for and enjoy. And a lot of it just has to do with horses' playfulness and their, their energy level. This morning, if you were watching, to go to the Oaks for a second, Lady Apple looked like if she had wings, she would have left the ground. She was bucking and jumping and prancing. When I see that, I also love when I see horses hobby horse, when they bounce back on their back legs and front legs, and they go back and forth, almost like they're hopping. Love it. I saw a funny side from the backside in 2003. Couldn't be pulled up, basically, of a gallop. Then when headed back to the gap, threw his head and basically said, I want to stay out here. I do not want to go back to the barn. Just little clues about happy horses and how they're feeling. And those are just the little nuance, because as Gary explains so well, these are right now the 20 best 3-year-old males in the game. And they're all in the hands of masterful trainers. So they all should be doing well. You're just looking for little extra clues. By my standards, if you watch the 4 workouts he's had here since Louisiana, it's unbelievable. And when you see a horse reach the track kitchen on the backside on a workout, that's a double check mark.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to find out your thoughts on, and this would help me a lot too as a handicapper, handicapping lightly raced colts. There's lots of 4-start horses in here, and obviously Justify kind of rewrote the rules to an extent, but help us through and what you're looking at with handicapping lightly raced. We talked extensively, for instance, about maximum security. You got a $16,000 maiden, couple of $50,000, and then the grade 1, and when's that going away too? Like what? How much credence do you put in so many starts and so few starts, and what are you looking for? Ed, we'll start with you.
Well, and it's an important topic to consider, because the way the Derby starters are going, 4 starts is somewhat of a norm. We have a few with much more than that, obviously. But as a handicapper, when you do deal with fields with fewer starts, one thing I'm willing to look at more is their best performance. We know what their ceiling is. Back in the hard boot days, 70s, 80s, even 90s, you had these progressions, 3-4 starts even before the Derby after many starts as a 2-year-old, and you wanted to see progression and a form cycle, and they're coming into the race the right way. As we saw from Justify last year, a horse I tried to beat, admittedly, and looked foolish trying to do so, but he ran a huge Santa Anita Derby, and I thought, okay, that's only his 3rd career start. That's it for him. That was his top performance. But as we saw in the next 3 races, he was able to replicate it. And I think with these lightly raced horses, we're seeing trainers, they reach the ceiling, and then they just maintain from there. And that's actually a reason I like by my standards. Now, he's had a few more starts. He's not quite as lightly raced as some, but he's at the ceiling. And if you trust Brett Calhoun, which I do, you're getting the right price that he can keep it going.
Okay, Gary, help me out with handicapping lightly raced.
I think if you're going to go with a lightly raced horse in the Derby, the first thing you need to make sure is that the horse has a good mind, because whether they have many races or a few races, there's no way they can prepare for the zoo, that is the walkover and the paddock and everything that goes on that day. But I think the thing, if you're going to roll the dice and go with a horse that's got 3 or 4 races in the Derby, you better go with a horse that's going to be up close. Because if they're back there in 16th and 17th and they're not seasoned, they're going to have to be Superman to come from there to win a race like the Derby in their 4th or 5th race. If you're going to place a wager on a horse that has way less starts than everyone else in the field, I would prefer a horse that's going to be up in the first 4 or 5 horses in the race for sure.